Hello and welcome back to the show. So I'm really excited about my guest today, Gary Sinderbrand, because he is an expert in AI and he is the inventor of the Rainmaker app and the founder and CEO of ArcheMatch, which is an AI-powered prospecting tool built originally for financial advisors that actually helped them raise the response rate from the industry standard of about 2 to 3% to now 25 to 40%. So really helping you as an advisor, as somebody who is going out there as a salesperson prospecting to really talk to the people who you want to talk to and who want to talk to you as well. So in today's episode, Gary's going to be sharing with us a little bit about what it is that he's built, some of the insights that he has on AI and what AI has to, be able to help us with in the coming years, in the coming months as well. And we're gonna have a lot of fun. So Gary, welcome to the show. Super excited to have you join us here today.
Thanks, Kobe. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I know we talked a little bit before the show about some of the things that you're working on, and it really interests me a lot and excites me too to hear that, there's people working on this kind of behind the scenes. But, for the audience that doesn't know who you are, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your background and, how did you get to this point now where you're building pretty advanced tools in AI for advisors and salespeople?
I often ask myself that same question. So I was the kid that took everything apart growing up. And a new phone would come into the house, I'd pull it apart to see if I could make it better. Uh, if we had a radio, I'd take it apart to try and figure out. Usually, when I put it back together, if it worked, it was just sheer luck. But I was always interested in how things delivered that final product. Everywhere from, the first remote control television sets to what we're dealing with now, which to a lot of folks just literally looks like magic. So as I think about the career that I had, primarily in wealth management, it was based in problem solving. It wasn't based so much in salesmanship. It was based in solving problems on behalf of others. And the most successful relationships I had were with people I genuinely cared about, that I really liked. It wasn't getting them the best returns possible. It wasn't, coming up with the best ideas possible. It was successful because I was able to find relationships where the client or the prospective client and I aligned on a lot of things. Maybe we shared a sense of humor, or shared, rooting for the same sports teams, but there were common anchors in there that we could always talk about beyond what the business aspect of it was. And I was always interested in people's stories. If I was going to manage their wealth, I really wanted to understand who were they before they were wealthy? What did they do? How did they face their challenges? And the more I would get that information, the better the relationship became, because the more aligned I felt with that individual. And I was fortunate enough pretty early in my career to make a decision that I was only going to deal with prospects and clients that I really cared about, that I felt some kinship towards, not recognizing at the time that down the line there may have been a way to create the possibility of that happening more so than it happening at random, which is how most professionals do it. So I was successful as a financial advisor at Merrill Lynch for a lot of years. I helped write a training program, which was the first peer-based training program that Merrill actually bought into. That ran for quite a long time, and was lucky enough to train about 12,000 of my closest friends and colleagues at Merrill during my period there. I spent about 22 years at Merrill. From there, I went over to UBS Private Wealth. I worked there for a bit and enjoyed it. I liked the teaching side. I also liked managing the money. Um, as I moved into consulting full time, dealing with problems which are specific to the financial advisory industry, which is kind of the aging out of the experienced guys like me and the replacement of younger guys coming in that never would have to survive kind of the crucible that I survived and my friends survived, which is there's a desk, there's a phone, good luck. And most people didn't make it. Well, that exists still today. Most people don't make it. So you have a lot of advisors, junior advisors, who are joining with senior guys in the hopes of taking over their books of business when they leave, and they're getting paid too much. They're not motivated, and they just have lost the art of prospecting, of being able to find someone that you get along with, that you can stay with for a long time. In your world, if you have a realtor that's either representing a buyer or a seller, unless there's good personal connectivity, that relationship probably A, doesn't work real well, or B, isn't going to lead to subsequent business down the line or any kind of referral business. And the best realtors I know share characteristics of the best advisors I know. They really give a shit about the client. They really want to do the right thing. And the client knows that. And they build their business on that reputation. The problem is that in most sales jobs, you find that out after you're already kind of over the threshold of engagement. You find out that the person that looked like a great prospect who's turned into a client is a nightmare because you didn't know him well enough. Now you're stuck. So what do you do? So realizing that this is a problem that is endemic in any professional relationship, not just real estate sales or wealth management, I always thought, wouldn't it be great if there were some way to identify up front who an advisor would be most likely to get along with? What would that look like? Now, what most people are doing with AI in the prospecting space is it falls into this category of what we call lead generation or lead gen. Lead gen is traditionally you buy a list of potential leads, you call them, they all hang up on you, maybe you talk to some of them, and occasionally something good happens. So now we have AI coming into the picture. But AI is nothing more than kind of an electronically generated yellow pages with good feeds from different programs that can, let's say, see somebody bought a house in a certain neighborhood, or someone changed jobs, or there was an announcement looking for transactional indicators. And those leads then get packaged and either sold or they're bid upon by somebody else, and they get calls and, hey, it looks like you just moved here. I'm local. I want to be your financial advisor. Click. So even though they may have a wealth indicator, the response rate on that cold solicitation is going to be in that 3 to 4% range. But as I thought about it as an advisor, as a producer, I thought in terms of the people I got along with best weren't necessarily the people that the fellow in the next office would get along with best, because that person's different than I am. So I took the reverse approach. I came up with a thought that I'm hardwired in a certain way. I'm going to behave a certain way. All of us are. Now, there's a psychologist that from Europe by the name of Carl Jung, who did a lot of work, did not agree with Sigmund Freud even a little bit. Jung's work was dark. He believed in you were guided by your shadow self, that in all of us there exists maybe one, two, possibly three or four different dark personalities that come out from time to time. And he categorized around 12 of them. And they run everything from ruler to jester to magician to everyman. It could be a variety to sage. It could be a variety of different things. But if you don't qualify on at least one of those, you're likely a sociopath. So Jung's brand of psychology completely counter to Freud, but made a lot of sense to me. So I started to ingest as much of Carl Jung's work as I could find. I was good friends with a psychologist in Philadelphia who actually trained with the Jung family and was able to get something published domestically called the Red Book, which is hundreds and hundreds of pages of ranting and raving in Carl Jung's work. So I initially just loaded that in to a program that Google has called Notebook LM. And Notebook LM ingested the entire thing, gives you a brief summary of what's there. And I just started to say, would it be possible, based on the information I've loaded in, for you to develop a set of discriminatory questions that would be multiple choice that would determine the primary and secondary archetypes of a financial advisor. And then I gave it some references to what a financial advisor does. It started printing out questions. And I said, well, that's pretty interesting. And I would play around with the questions and I'd come up with different responses. I would say, well, that's cool. So it would rate me as an archetype as a sage, primarily, which means I like to teach. And I'm very detailed when I do. And sometimes I over explain. So I said, well, from a professional standpoint, if I wanted to go out and use the fact that I was a sage, what type of professions should I focus on where I could interact appropriately? It comes back and it says, well, you could talk to other sages because they'd like to learn, but the ruler archetype that really values detail and concision would be a good place to start. I said, can you give me some professional examples of a ruler archetype? And it comes out and it starts printing out CEO, COO, CFO, people that need definitive answers. So I said, I got to see if I can keep this going. So from there, I started a vibe code on a program called Lovable. And vibe coding is you just tell it what you want to do and it starts writing code. It's it's so much more advanced now than it was when I started because the Lovable basically got me a working prototype where I was able to not only plug in my own information, my own archetype, but I was able to have it scan multiple professions and research the dominant archetype in each of those professions. So now I had my own archetype. I had professions where I'd likely correlate, and I knew anecdotally because I had a real book of clients for a long time. These were the types of people I love to work with. So then I took it a step further. I'm not sure if I moved it off of the Lovable platform at this point or not. I may have moved over to either Cursor or Claude at that point. And I said, so I know what these professions are. There's this other data set over here called Apollo, which has information on 260 million people. If I gave it a geographical area, would it be able to produce for me people in those professions in that area and give me their most likely archetype? All of a sudden, it started putting these things out. I said, okay, now I have a name. Let me go deeper. So I used another AI tool. I said, based on us knowing the following parameters, I wanted you to do a deep dive on me personally using LinkedIn, and I think we were using Google Gemini at that point. Personally, learn as much about me as you can. And I want you to look at this prospect who's the CEO of this ball bearing company. And I want you to do an equally deep dive. And I want you to plot the points where we connect. So it did that. And we wrote some algorithms to give it a score. From there, I said, well, this looks like a guy I'd probably be interested in talking to. What would be the best way to reach out and try and connect? Now we're at that 3% cold connection rate. And it came out and said, well, that's simple. Let's write a connection request that ties the two of you together. And then it comes back and it says, let's say you're my target. It says, Kobe, um, I caught your work. I caught comments you made at a conference last year on such and such and such and such about sustainable growth in family-owned businesses. I find myself dealing with a lot of those same issues. I'd love to pick your brain on how you've reached some of your conclusions. Would you like to connect? Now, I want you to think about that for a second and just make believe that I tagged something that was pretty personal to you. I took the time to reach out and research you. I'm not soliciting you to be a client. I'm just interested in knowing you a little bit better. I'm not telling you a lot about me, but I know a lot more about you than you know about me. And I know that if we connect, we're probably going to hit it off. So we started testing that, and the response rates on cold connections were at 30% or more. So now all of a sudden, I've got a prospect I'm in a conversation with. I go from 3% to 30%. That is scalable. And in the world of professional prospecting, it's solid gold. And that's how, from that point forward, I built out Rainmaker.
That's very impressive how you came across all of these different points in what you're building, right, for yourself through AI and some of the knowledge that you've had to creating this app, right, where you're able to help professional prospectors, like you said, to go out there and make better connections to increase the conversion rate from, in your words, the top of the funnel, right? The first connection, the first contact. So, just to kind of follow up on that. So when you make one of these connections or one of your clients who's using this makes one of these connections through, this new prospecting method, right? That's based off AI who can help increase your conversion rate when they get into a conversation. Usually are you coaching them on what that first conversation looks like, or are you just kind of expecting them to be able to take it from there once they've made that connection from the first place? I'm really curious to kind of see that,
So
like, how do they turn that into a
in an
sale?
ideal world, it would be the latter. But the reason, even with that high conversion rate on contact, the reason that most salespeople fail is they move immediately to a features and benefits sale, having no idea who they're talking to. So they've completely blown that possible connection. So I give them active coaching. Well, what do we do? What do we say? Be a human, be a Joe. Go talk to the person, see if you like them. Ask them how they were successful, what they did. The more you allow other people to tell you their own story of their success, the more they end up liking the listener. So, right alongside being able to identify that most appropriate prospect, there is a program running called Ask Archie. Ask Archie is essentially 40 years of wealth management experience, hundreds of counseling calls that I've done with other advisors that I've recorded, dozens of presentations I've given that were videotaped. And it's all basically combined into this enormous bolus mess of word salad that is just makes no sense whatsoever until we apply some cool AI tools to it. And what we're doing is we're asking AI to go into this enormous mess of words, all of which is transcribed, and we're asking it to generate answers to specific questions that have never been posed and never been answered from this big mess of words. And there's another thing we use, which is called RAG, which is retrieval, augmentation, and generate. So think about ChatGPT as knowing everything and knowing nothing. Every answer it gives you is right and it's also wrong because it's just the language model it's looking at is the world. So what if we could take a contained language model and we could break it up into different blocks that fall under different frameworks, and we could train it, and then I could clone my voice and I could answer the question of what do we do when we get there? And you would hear me say, all right, Kobe, don't be an idiot. Don't go for the sale. You don't even know if you like this guy. This is how it's going to sound, by the way. Meet him for coffee, sit down, thank him for there, ask him to tell you his story. How did you come to this? How did you get to this? How did you get to that? The more he talks, the smarter he thinks you are. Now, at the end, unless the guy's just a total nincompoop, he's going to say, hey, tell me about what you do. They got one or two lines, and I give you those lines. I protect people from financial advisors giving them horrible advice, which normally leads to, well, how do I know if I'm getting horrible advice? And then I give them a question around constructive doubt. And then normally in that process, I'll have a set of statements within the day because I'll ask that person that I haven't solicited, I'll say, look, I don't know, if you invest or not, but if you do, I would just pose one question. When you look at your statements at the end of the month, can you correlate what you own with what you're trying to accomplish? 9 times out of 10, it's like, huh? What? I just want to make money. At that point, there are times I just want to say to the prospect, let's just sign the papers now because an hour from now, you're going to. We can skip all that part. You're going to come with me. But that sets up that sales cycle. So what have I done? I identified a person. I did research on them to know who they were. I listened to their entire story. They asked me what I did. Very light, very simple. And they had to give me the information to get there. So what Ask Archie does is it will coach the FA through every aspect of that. And it takes into account the advisor's archetype because a jester will learn and express themselves differently than a ruler archetype would. So we tune the language to what is comfortable for that archetype. We also tune the learning the same way. So if you're a jester archetype and you're 1 year in the business, you're going to hear a completely different response from Archie coaching you than if you're an everyman archetype with 25 years in the business. So we were able to contour it down and put those different axes in there. Um, the two of them together form an operating system for financial advisory. Um, all you have to do is stay within the lines, and you're going to be able to access not just the wisdom I've generated, but what I've learned dealing with hundreds and hundreds of the most successful people out there. So it's cool stuff. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, what you're talking about now with how this helps financial advisors, it helps anybody who is in consultation and sales, especially I think this has very big implications for real estate agents as well, because it sounds like the process that you're describing is exactly what a real estate agent, right, would be doing, except they are servicing different clientele, they provide a different service, and it's just a slightly different conversation based on their expertise, right? Would you say so that this same program that you've built for financial advisors, if tweaked and tailored a little bit, would work just as well for a real estate professional?
So we've identified about 8 to 10 adjacent sleeves. And real estate is one of the closer in sleeves because it's so personality driven. So we craft a set of questions that would help us identify the predominant archetypical characteristics of the real estate agent. They wouldn't be questions that would necessarily just be attuned to financial services. They would be questions that would test for certain things like frustration, what success looked like, how you handle different client situations. That would be real world. So you would answer those questions. We would then ask you, like, what do you do when you're not selling real estate? Because we want to learn as much about you as we can. And it would form your archetype and then tell you, look, your best opportunities are to work with these types of clients. Then it's a pretty easy jump from there to set up some search parameters that say within a certain geographical area, you are interested in executives that work for companies that, let's say, have at least 1,000 people that have recently relocated to the area. Because I'm sure you're more aware than I am, if you work for a large company and you relocate, they give you a relocation package, right? They're going to give you some money to rent, let you figure out what's where. And if you become really familiar with the challenges of that group and you're reaching out to them because you understand what they're going through and you're somewhat aligned, and the outreach is, look, I know you're new. I know it's frightening. Um, I've been here forever. Again, I'm kind of making this up here. I've been here forever. Love to sit and talk to you and offer any assistance I can. Not let me show you a house. But when I moved out to Vale, it was some real estate people that helped me get situated. They knew everybody, they knew everything. So it would very easily align itself in real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. To hear you say that, it reinforces, right, what I believe as well, which is this program, and it helps with a lot of real estate agents. And one of the cool things I think for agents in the industry is the fact that there's a lot of them who are utilizing AI. Now, probably not to the extent as effectively as you've mentioned, how you're helping financial advisors, but there's a lot of real estate agents who utilize AI to this day, but it's just not custom to them. It's not sometimes even custom to the real estate industry. So when you're putting together a database, right, whether if this is an agent who's going out there trying to build this or something like this on their own, or maybe they want to plug into a similar system like yours. When you're building out a database where it's training the system not just on the agent themselves, which they will provide that information, but on the industry as a whole, other than, kind of some of the proprietary psychological, data that you have, what are some things that you're drawing upon to build out the industry specificness of the AI that separates it from like a ChatGPT or a Claude, one of these other AI tools that are just
Great question.
generic?
That's a great, really good question. So what you would do would be a good example of that would be you've been doing your podcast for quite some time. You have a lot of digital content stored, right? So a good place to start to get kind of a composite, you know, I didn't want to call it, it's not really a chatbot, to get this composite wisdom would be to transcribe everything you've ever done, start to put some parameters in, and the parameters could be, or the frameworks could be from prospecting to client loyalty to client type to lost sales to gain sales, anything that would you would look at and say, oh man, I wish I did this that way instead of this way. So we would need some expertise to be programmed into that rag, but that would be a great place to start with all that baseline knowledge that's combined from all these different people. On top of that, any publications, any writings, any articles, things that could keep things current. You could tell that the AI that you want to augment this with articles written in the past 5 years that concern buyer behaviors, that concern how people feel when they're relocated. Anything that anything at all can be thrown in there. All that information is not regurgitated word for word, where it says, how do I do this? And chat pulls it up and it's sourced. It doesn't work that way. It comes in and it knows who you are as the questioner and it answers you personally. And then it gives you the answer. And then you can come back to it and say, hey, Archie, I don't really understand this. I tried it this way and that. Here was the result. And it's going to go back and say, Kobe, I'm glad you had that experience, but here's the thing I need you to focus on. Here's where we looked at it. Here's what you did, but here's what we really want you to try and do. So I want you to go out and you do this the next time you do it and let me know. So you go out and do it. You come back. First thing it's going to say is, hey, Kobe, how'd it go? And you're going to say, it worked. I'm not sure why. Tell me exactly what happened. You're going to tell it. All of that is going into this ball of wisdom, right? So your response and the RAG response are going to basically go into another chunk and bulk up one area of the framework. Someone 10 minutes later has a similar question. They'll get a better answer than you did because your experience is already in there. So that is one way you can give it domain expertise and it can apply anywhere. The tricky part is not the mechanism because the mechanism is like a spreadsheet, right? It's just words. The tricky part is tuning the output to something that the listener or the user will resonate with. So if we know your experience level, you've been in real estate for 15 years, it's going to talk to you differently than if you've been in real estate 3 years. It's going to recognize what the pressures and the hurdles are, and it's going to be a little bit more nurturing in that for that third year, and it's going to hold you a little more accountable in the 15th year. So it basically tunes itself as kind of the consciousness sitting on your shoulder. Um, it's occasionally it will hallucinate creatively, which is kind of fun. Oh, look at it. No, no. And then you have to come in and say, do not do that. You put that in the pro. I never want to see that again. And the thing apologizes to you. I'm really sorry. I mean, it's kind of funny. The AI can get a little bit sycophantic, which you have to be aware of. But we're just moving words around. And the more experience we get, the smarter it becomes.
Yeah, that's really interesting with AI models, right? The fact that there's more people that use it, and the more time somebody uses it, the better it gets, right? The more information it has to draw upon so that it has more experience and can actually, like you said, put out a better answer the next time because of the interaction it had with somebody else or with you the first time. So, you did mention, one of the things that helps the AI model tailor its response to you is your experience level. But other than that, and you also mentioned your psychological profile, your archetype. Other than these two things, are there anything else that maybe when the user's coming in and for the first time using it, that you're asking, the AI model is asking to make sure that it's able to tailor its response better to you, so it resonates with you. So you mentioned, like you said, the psychological profile and then experience. Is there anything else aside from that the AI model asks for?
So the more it knows about you personally, the more it's able to explain things to you metaphorically. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that your background is you're ex-military, and it's going to want to know, well, what branch of the service? And you could say, well, I was a naval aviator. So now the AI model knows that you are alive because you admire precision. You want things explained in a way that makes sense to you. You're also familiar with checklists. You're also familiar with being able to do things by rote, because those are all characteristics of an aviator. So it's going to talk to you in that tone, and it's going to say something like, Kobe, I want you to do things just like a checklist in the following fashion. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, and by the way, that prospect you're talking to happens to own a Piper Cherokee and seems like a pretty good pilot. So there may be some connectivity there, because if, as a regular civilian pilot, finding out you're talking to a guy who used to land on boats, that's like, forget it. All you're going to do is talk about aviation. You're going to want to hang out with that guy just to talk flying, because that's what pilots do. Skiers are the same way. So it might ask you for like tribal connections. Um, if you're a skier and I'm a skier, we're always going to have something to talk about. It's usually like the worst runs we've ever had, or the jury of the day, or just kind of some, inside baseball knowledge. So the more you interact with it, the more it learns about you, the smarter it becomes. And that's typical for a number of the chatbots out there now. For instance, both Claude and ChatGPT are my mainstays. They know a lot about me. They'll give me answers contextually that they know I want. I mean, I told it early on, when you're explaining something technical, I want you to make believe that I am a brain damaged Saint Bernard dog that I can barely see. Walk me through it. So it's wild how these things become. Um, One thing I want to say, I think that's really critical to all of this. Are you an Apple guy or a PC guy?
I would say Apple guy.
Why?
For me, it's because of the simplicity of how easy it is to use the systems and how everything's pretty much the same.
Okay. So are you an iPhone guy?
Yes, sir. iPhone
Okay.
guy.
So there's a lecturer out there by the name of Simon Sinek, Sinek. I don't know if you've ever listened to him.
I have, yeah.
He talks about why Apple's different than everybody else. And he talks about this concept of profusion. And it's not the question of other companies can't make phones or computers. It's the question of Apple basically marketed themselves from an identity standpoint, not a technology standpoint. And the way Steve Jobs built everything was figure out what the problem is and then build the solution as simply as possible. That was his whole approach. That was it. So when I started to think about this problem, prospecting, in a way that I might be able to utilize tools to fix it, I didn't think about, hey, look at all these cool tools I can use and build, which is what most of AI is being spent on right now. It's like invent the tool and then look for the problem it can solve. I identified the problem and said, what would I need to do to solve the problem? And then one step at a time, I pulled the tools together that I needed to use to solve the problem. And then, over the past year, we've hardened up our code. We've got some cool algorithms. We've got a patent application in, but it was figure out the intractable problem that was unsolvable with technology 5 years ago and see if there are tools out there that can solve it today. I would put the same thing to you in real estate. What are the biggest problems you face? And are there solutions available that might be able to solve the problems? And the cool thing is, with the ability to vibe code, which means you open up one of these coding apps, you start talking to it, it's going to come up with something that's going to blow most people away. You literally get to invent on the fly, which I think is really fun. But that's how I built Rainmaker. Figure out the problem, find the stuff that can solve.
Yeah, that's I think the best way to look at AI now with so much hype and so much noise around the industry with, AI being available in the past couple of years. You're exactly like you said it exactly right, which is there's so many people out there who's building the tool, right? Who's building the technology and then finding a problem to solve with it, trying to force it into
Oh
their
yeah.
day-to-day business when it's not even necessary, just so they can sound cool, it can sound, next gen or whatever they're trying to do is like next marketing ploy, but that's not the right way to look at it. The right way is to find the problem first and then see if this new technology can come in and solve this problem that was, unsolvable before, or, not getting the results that you want before or as efficiently as effectively. So, just to kind of wrap up today, looking forward, right? With AI, it's already evolved so much within the past, I'll say 3, 4 years ever since ChatGPT came out. Looking forward, where do you see AI going? Because there's just still a lot of people who I think are maybe a little bit frustrated, right? There's a lot of, like you even mentioned as well, with the hallucinations. But, moving forward in the next, I would say year or two, maybe maximum the next 5 years, where do we see AI going? What are some of the things that we can't even comprehend today that, you might think, in the next maybe 5 years that is going to be commonplace for sales professionals and business owners?
So I think the human element becomes enhanced. I
Mhm.
think it enhances human interaction, doesn't take away from it. There are certain things that AI is just going to be able to do better than humans, but there's going to be things that require empathy, require the ability to have true emotion in a relationship. I think AI utilized properly frees up humanity to indulge in more creativity, to indulge in more kind of heuristic dreaming. What if? Wouldn't it be great if? That kind of a thing. So I think if we embrace the technology from the standpoint of what the possibilities might be, not what they are, because we don't know yet, what the possibilities might be, and we try and utilize it to kind of improve the human condition, I think that the future is yet to be written. We don't know what it's going to look like. I will say, pardon me, I'm sorry. I will say that every, like, this time it's different kind of a thing, whether it's the internet, whether it's like dog, delivering pet food, automatically, whatever it might be, it never turns out to be the way most people think it's going to be. Right now, the capital investment in AI is absolutely dwarfing the capital output. There's much more money being invested than people can identify what the flow is in the other direction. The biggest companies in the world right now are losing billions of dollars. ChatGPT or OpenAI, Anthropic, a couple of the big ones. They don't even care what kind of money they're making. They want to capture market share. Companies that used to charge you a token to do a certain thing are now going to give you 35 tokens for free just to get your eyeballs on their stuff. So we see more and more stuff being invented every single day. But the things that I would focus on are the things that can make a difference for what you need to do. Like what matters to you as the individual, because that's what Jobs focused on. He focused on creating technology that would enable people. It didn't replace them, it enabled them. And I've been an Apple guy almost forever. I switched from PC and I get it. And nice thing is, if I have a problem with anything in Apple, I can just ask one of my chat buddies. You ask a chat bot, it's going to not only at this point tell me what to do, it's going to say, let me have control of your machine. And I'll go, fine, go fix it. And I'll come back and it's fixed. Meanwhile, I'm off doing something else. So it's going to continue to expand. It will become, I would say, more specialized to the inventor side of things, because that's how I look at what I'm doing now, is really kind of creating and inventing to solve old problems. And it will become transparent to folks that aren't really paying attention to it because it's everywhere. For instance, if I have a FedEx tr delivery tomorrow, I don't really care that a fairly sophisticated AI plotted the most efficient route for that truck driver to take between where the airport was and where I live. But that's a plot on AI. Doesn't bother me. Going to be able to do it, take it into account and track what's going on. So there's things it can do that are simple, things that can do that are complex. I think that one of the things that we're going to have to wrestle with is this concept of uh, Anthropic 5.6 being written by Anthropic 5.5. Anthropic's latest release called Fable was all written by the prior release of the code. That's a little bit unsettling because, then all the things it's going to decide, maybe we're at the singularity and it's Skynet all over again. I don't think it's going to get that bad, but you got to have some responsibility in how you use it. The thing I would close with is it's a great time to be alive. And anybody who says that, look at how shitty things are around here, either economically, politically, but this is all transitory. This will pass. We'll come to other things. Look out as far on the horizon as you can and think about what the possibilities could be. Doesn't matter if you know how to build it. If you focus on it as being important, all of a sudden you're going to start to notice things that are going to allow you to make that transition from where things are currently to where things could be in the future. And everybody's going to look at you and go, how the hell did you do that? And you're going to go, I just made it up as I went, which is how most great ideas happen.
100%. Gary, thank you so much for taking some time today, sharing your knowledge or value with us here today. For anybody out there who's listening to this that want to get a hold of you, that want to learn more about what it is that you're doing, or maybe they want to plug into what it is that you're doing, work with you, what are some of the best places for people to find you?
So they can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty simple. You can find me online at ArcheMatch, ARCHE match.com. That'll show you what we've got built currently. If you want to be among the earlier users when we flip the switch, you can send me a note. Or if you are in an adjacent business where professional prospecting is involved, let me know what the business is. And maybe we'll have a conversation about building a sleeve for you because this technology is adaptable in a variety of different ways. And it's just a question of plugging in the different variables. So love to hear from other people who have different ideas about how it might work. Real estate being a good example.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely encourage you guys if you're focused on AI, you're using AI, definitely reach out to Gary, especially if you're in the real estate space, because there's so much implications to this that can be applied to what it is that we do as agents. But just Gary, before we let you go here, any last piece of advice, anything you want to just leave us with before we sign off today?
Um, don't believe the hype. If you're going to try and educate yourself on this, do it from the perspective of a user. Most of these things you can get pretty deep in for 20 bucks a month. Play with it. Educate yourself around it. No one knew how to use email before email got here. No one knew how to use a computer before computers got here. This is a way to expand your mental horizons in ways that just were not available 5 years ago. And don't be afraid to dream of something ridiculous, irrationally ridiculous, and see if it can build out. You never know.
Absolutely. Gary, thanks again for being on the show. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you in the next show. Take
Thanks,
care.
Kobe.